So I've been focused on a lot of negative news lately, and that's really because most news is negative. But if you're like me and you need a pick-me-up every now and then and some positive news to help you realize that not everything in the world is terrible, then hopefully this video will cheer you up, because I'm going to talk about NDP leadership candidate Niki Ashton. So Niki Ashton is running in the NDP leadership race happening right now in Canada. And full disclosure, in 2015, I ran as a Green Party MP candidate in Canada. So I ran against the NDP. But that's not going to stop me from praising the words that are coming out of Niki Ashton in this interview. So this was an interview with Gerard de Trollio, from Jacobin, and the answers are absolutely phenomenal. And it reminds me a lot of Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn. So if you're a fan of Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn and you like their policies, you like their platform, then you're going to like Niki Ashton. But before I begin, I will say that I do completely disagree with her on one point, and I will get to that at the end of the video. And it's one that I'm pretty passionate about too. So, it's while I agree with her on almost everything else, and she's by far the most progressive person I've seen run for the NDP, and she even beats out, I would say, in many ways, the Green Party in terms of her platform. I do disagree with her on one point, and I will get to that, but I want to highlight some of her answers here because they're just fantastic. So let me get to this first one. I'm deeply inspired by the work of progressive left candidates and movements around the world. Whether Sanders or Corbyn, they've inspired many of my generation. I'm an older millennial. Because they spoke clearly about the challenges we face, particularly growing inequality and climate change, and rejected the neoliberal status quo on how to tackle the biggest challenges of our time. They put forward bold ideas, whether it's taxing the rich, talking clearly about nationalization, or commitment to free tuition. And they've worked with social movements and activists on the ground. So right off the bat, she allies herself with people like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, which immediately, if you are a progressive or a socialist, you like what you hear, because this is somebody who is aware of these other movements around the world and is influenced by them. And you see that in the rest of her platform. Now, she's going to go deeper on into the issues with the neoliberal agenda. The neoliberal mantra that greater wealth will come from privatization, deregulation, and austerity has clearly been proven wrong. We need to take a left turn and be re-inspired by our roots within the party, but also take inspiration from other leaders around the world, like Sanders and Corbyn, who have used the word socialism on a regular basis. So one thing I love about Niki Ashton, and you're going to notice this throughout her answers, is that she's not afraid to go there. So she's absolutely fine bringing up the word socialism, which many politicians, especially in the West, are afraid to use. But Niki Ashton is not afraid to use it and wear it proudly. So let's get more into her specific policies, and this next one I find is really interesting. Our campaign has made it clear that if we're talking about resource extraction, pipelines, and other projects, there must be consultation and, very importantly, consent from Indigenous communities. Otherwise, these projects cannot go forward. So this is a big deal here. But if you're American, can you imagine somebody running for Congress and talking about the need to consult with Indigenous communities before using their land? Now, it's amazing. I mean, it seems so obvious. So, for example, DAPL would never have happened because the land doesn't even really belong to the state. It actually belongs to the Indigenous community. So, if they were actually consulted before these projects go forward, then it prevents more issues down the line. And it solidifies a relationship between these Indigenous communities and the government, which is important for a number of reasons. Now, let's go to the next issue she covers here, and that's feminism. I've made it very clear that I subscribe to an intersectional feminism, recognizing that the barriers that women face, that various people face based on gender, always intersects with class, with race, with ability, with sexual orientation, and sexual identity. It's a rejection of what is known as white feminism, which is embodied by much of what Hillary Clinton and some of her peers have stood for. So connecting Hillary Clinton to white feminism is something I haven't heard a politician do. And Niki Ashton is exactly right. So if you've ever if you've ever been on Twitter and had to deal with some of Hillary Clinton's crazy fans, and look, I'm not saying all of Hillary Clinton's fans are nuts, but there is a good section of them, at least vocal ones, that don't quite understand intersectional feminism. They're just focused on themselves. But when you realize that feminism is actually the discussion of equality, then you also have to include all other races and class and sexual orientation. So this is where true progressives understand this issue is not just a social issue, but it's also an economic one. And that's something that Hillary Clinton and her campaign and many of her supporters never quite understood. Now, her next comment here on Justin Trudeau it embodies exactly how I feel, and it embodies reality. And I think even if you are a big fan of Justin Trudeau, it's going to be hard for you to deny this next point. I've been very critical of Justin Trudeau's claim that he's a feminist. You can't be a feminist prime minister and the second largest arms dealer in the Middle East, selling arms to the Saudi regime that targets women and LGBTQ folks. And that's exactly right. How can you claim to be a feminist and a leader for human rights around the world when you align yourself with and sell weapons to countries that target groups of people based on their gender or identity? And here we go. Even though I think Niki Ashton is awesome, I don't agree with her on everything. And in fact, I vehemently disagree with her on universal basic income. So she is against it, and I'm for it. And it's possible you disagree with me, but I feel like the facts are on my side. So let me just first show you how she feels about it. But for me, there are red flags, including that there are many on the right championing it at the same time that they support policies that seek to cut healthcare and education. So this first point is just dumb. That's like me saying I can't be against interventionist wars because libertarians are against interventionist wars, and libertarians support ideas that I don't agree with. So just because a group of people support the same thing you do on a single policy doesn't mean that there's red flags there. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. You can agree with a conservative or a libertarian or whoever on a particular issue and not agree with them on other issues. So using this as a point against universal basic income just doesn't make any sense. Now, let me get to her next point, which is one that is heard more often, but I also don't agree with. It's also clear to me that universal basic income, when discussed in the context of precarious work, doesn't actually put an end to the rise of precarious work and automation. So this one is either a fundamental misunderstanding of the goals with universal basic income, or it's simply a talking point for the labor unions, and it's kind of a bit of both. So universal basic income is not supposed to put an end to automation. Automation is happening anyways. Automation is going to continue to happen. Why do you want a crappy job that can be done by a robot? You can't stop where the future is going. We're going to get to a point where all the crappy jobs are done by robots because they have no feeling. And people will be free. This is the idea with universal basic income. When we get to that point, and we're getting to that point where robots are taking over, the universal basic income allows people to start their own business and really give back to the community in their own way, using their own skill set, their own unique abilities, and their own interests. That's the ultimate goal of universal basic income, and that's where it's going to go eventually. Because, as I said, you can't stop automation. So, to me, this point, the NDP is supported in large part by labor unions and those industries in general. So I understand why she would try to make this point, because this kind of point of trying to stop automation may sound good to the unions. But in reality, you can't stop automation. So it's just a really odd, I mean, she has absolutely no real critical hit against universal basic income here. So, and this is actually where the Green Party in Canada and the NDP divide. So the Green Party do support a universal basic income. Now, even though I disagree with her on this point, and I disagree with her completely, it doesn't take away from her other points. So I actually implore you to go and read the full interview, especially if you're Canadian. Go and read this interview. I'll have a link to it in the description below. And really hear out Niki Ashton. And maybe you're a conservative, maybe you're a liberal voter, maybe you're an NDP already, maybe you're a Green voter, and just listen to her. Maybe this will make you turn NDP. And if you actually want to become a member of the NDP and vote for the leadership race, the deadline is August 17th. So you have to sign up to be a member of the NDP by August 17th to be able to vote for the NDP leader. And then the actual vote takes place sometime this fall, and that's when that all goes down. My money's still on Niki Ashton. I hope she comes out and wins this. I agree with her largely. She is a strong voice in this community, and she is a real progressive. Even if I have this disagreement with her, it's fine. But I don't know. Read the interview, check her out. And to me, this is the closest thing we have right now to a Bernie Sanders or a Jeremy Corbyn. And I'm just glad that there are voices like this rising up, not just in those countries, but also in Canada and really around the world.